Here, look at this. Zoom in here on Google Maps. You'll see a military base in the middle of the desert, then another, and another, and another. If you keep scrolling, it doesn't stop.
From Morocco that created the world's longest mine.
The world's second largest wall after the Great Wall of China.
It is a vast sand wall that runs 2,700 kilometers across the desert. It is 17 times larger than the Berlin Wall and much, much deadlier. It's guarded by 130,000 soldiers, patrolled by Israeli drones, and surrounded by 9 million landmines, the densest minefield on Earth, and you've probably never seen it. The Kingdom of Morocco wants it to stay that way. The Berm slices through Western Sahara, a place most maps can't even agree exists. Beneath its sands lie some of the world's richest deposits of phosphates, desperately needed to create fertilizer for the world's growing farms. Its fishing waters feed European markets. Its wind and sun power distant cities, all without the consent of the local people. 50 years ago, Spain promised the people here a vote to choose their future. Instead, this land was invaded. The vote never happened, and Western Sahara remains the last colony in Africa. Here's why. So, who are the people boxed in by this wall? Well, to understand that, we have to look back. These are the Sahrawi people, the indigenous people of Western Sahara. They are mostly Muslims and they speak the distinct Hassaniya dialect of Arabic, which is different than the Arabic spoken in Morocco. For thousands of years they lived as nomads, herding camels and goats between oases. They were vital middlemen in the vast trans-Saharan trade network. Then, in 1884, European powers met in Berlin to decide how to carve up the African continent between their colonial empires. Spain, with its Canary Islands just 100 kilometers away, claimed this area and named it Spanish Sahara. Spain, under the long-time dictatorship of Francisco Franco, crushed uprisings here in the 1930s and 50s, but the resistance kept resurfacing. In the 1970s, Mohammad Basiri, inspired by Gandhi, founded the peaceful Harakat Tahrir movement to protest for independence. In June of 1970, thousands gathered in the city of El Ayoun at what became known as the Zimla Intifada. Spanish forces opened fire, massacring the protesters. They arrested Basiri and he was never seen again. Right, so around this time the United Nations was pushing for something called decolonization, which gave independence to dozens of countries in the middle of the 20th century. In 1963, they placed Spanish Sahara on the list of non-self-governing territories, which was essentially a euphemism for colony. The UN General Assembly passed resolution after resolution affirming the inalienable right of the people of the Sahara to self-determination. For Franco, the Sahara was too rich to give up. Spanish officials had seen that the amount of phosphates in the ground there could give the local population lives equal to that of some developed countries in Europe, and Spain wanted that wealth.
Its vast beds of phosphate make it the world's second biggest producer of fertilizer.
3 years after the Zimla massacre, a small band of Sahrawi insurgents attacked a Spanish outpost, and they called themselves the Frente Popular para la Liberación de Cejilla Alhambra y Río de Oro, or simply the Polisario Front. They were part of a wave of armed anti-colonial movements that were sweeping the Third World, from Angola to Vietnam. The Polisario Front quickly gained the overwhelming support of the Sahrawi people. This was their liberation movement. By 1974, Franco was sick, Spain was facing UN pressure, and the Polisario Front's guerrilla attacks were taking a toll. And by the 70s, Spanish Sahara stood out as one of the last places on the African continent still under European colonial rule. Spain finally gave in. They promised to organise an independence referendum for early 1975. Morocco, who gained independence from France in 1956, and Mauritania, who gained independence from France in 1960, objected. They believed that Western Sahara belonged to them, and they asked the International Court of Justice to make a ruling. Mauritania made their claim based on similar ethnicity, language and culture. Morocco's claim, however, was different. When the French left Morocco in 1956, they left the Alawi dynasty in charge as the monarchs of the country. The deal was that the Alawi kings would maintain French influence over banking, the military and business interests in the country, and the French would help the monarchy put down any left-wing or democratic uprisings. Uprisings and unrest in newly independent Morocco were quite frequent due to the poverty France had left there, and they had to be constantly crushed. Unlike its neighbour Algeria, Morocco had no oil to bankroll its economy. So the monarchy embraced an idea: Greater Morocco. This idea became popular in 1956 and was soon embraced by the monarchy. It claimed that Morocco's true pre-colonial territory included parts of Algeria, northern Mali, and all of Mauritania and Western Sahara. The evidence for this claim is mostly dubious. It was based on certain tribal leaders at certain times over the centuries pledging loyalty to some Moroccan sultans. But the evidence didn't matter. These territories had something Morocco needed: resources. This myth of a lost great empire served two purposes. For ordinary Moroccans trapped in poverty, it gave them a kind of nationalist pride. For the Moroccan elites already drenched in wealth, it was a distraction to keep the anger on the streets pointed outward. In 1963, King Hassan II invaded Algeria using this theory. It failed, and relations with Algeria never recovered. One by one, Morocco dropped its claims on its neighbours, all except one: Western Sahara. After Spain announced it would hold an independence referendum, the UN sent a mission to Spanish Sahara to ask them what they actually wanted. It found the majority of the population within Spanish Sahara was manifestly in favour of independence. On the 16th of October 1975, the International Court of Justice issued its opinion. They determined that the materials and information presented to it do not establish any tie of territorial sovereignty between the territory of Western Sahara and the Kingdom of Morocco or the Mauritanian entity. It concluded nothing Morocco presented overruled the right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination. So that should have been it. International law was pretty clear. The Sahrawi people were owed a vote on their independence. But then something strange happened.
In the sandy wastes of Spanish Sahara, Morocco's King Hassan had sent 350,000 of his people to stake a claim to this phosphate-rich desert.
King Hassan II refused to accept the ICJ's conclusion. Within hours of the ICJ's verdict, King Hassan announced he was organising a Green March for the 6th of November 1975. 350,000 unarmed Moroccan civilians would cross into Western Sahara to liberate the land. The march, though, was simply theatre. A week earlier, Moroccan troops had crossed the border, occupying the posts that Spanish troops were abandoning and fighting the Polisario resistance. Hassan's timing was incredibly convenient. The day after Hassan announced a march, Francisco Franco fell into a coma. Spain was paralysed. Within days, Spain, Morocco and Mauritania had cut a deal. The Madrid Agreement. They carved up Western Sahara. Morocco got the north and Mauritania the south. And Spain got to withdraw with dignity and secured fishing rights and a share of future phosphate profits. This was an entirely illegal deal. No country in the world recognized it. Spain refused to hold a referendum. It illegally handed Western Sahara away to two other countries, abandoned its duty to decolonize the territory, and simply betrayed the Sahrawi people. By late 1975, Morocco and Mauritania's invasions were in full swing.
For control of 105,000 square miles of the cruelest desert on earth.
Guerrilla army is pitted against Morocco's modern armed forces.
Moroccan troops seized the Bokra phosphate mines and the largest city, El Ayoun. According to testimony before a US congressional subcommittee, the refugees who were in Western Sahara at the end of January 1976 and the beginning of February through mid-February of 1976 were bombed, strafed and napalmed. There was a decided attempt by the Moroccan invading forces to eliminate these people.
The planes came to bomb us on a Sunday at 11 a.m. in February of 1976. Many people were killed. During the attack, women who were pregnant had miscarriages. The limbs of children were blown off. Some were burned like ashes. The first day, the planes came back 3 times to bomb us. They came back every day that week to bomb again and again.
Half the Swahili population became refugees overnight, as airstrikes drove tens of thousands on a grueling desert march towards Algeria. Moroccan troops deliberately killed livestock, destroyed homes, and burned tents to make sure the refugees had nothing to return to. By the 27th of February 1976, Spain had completely withdrawn. That same day, the Polisario declared the Sahara Arab Democratic Republic. The Polisario Front branded itself as a democratic, secular nationalist movement. They did genuinely build democratic systems in the camps in Algeria. They elevated women to leadership roles.
Morocco wants to control and exploit our country and its wealth. But the Moroccans are convinced that as long as one Sahrawi is alive, they can't achieve this goal.
They freed black slaves held by nomads, and they promised to nationalize the phosphate mines when they got independence. They wanted to modernize traditional Swahili society and overcome tribalism as a form of social organization. Tens of thousands of refugees were settled at camps near the Algerian town of Tindouf. Algeria provided shelter, food, and weapons, partly out of revolutionary solidarity. Algeria at the time was an international anti-colonial superstar that had won a popular revolution against the French. They were seen as champions of third world self-determination, and as one Moroccan official complained, Algeria had La Aura. This contrasted with Morocco, whose conservative monarchy was France's last client king in North Africa. But there was another more strategic reason behind Algeria's support for the Polisario Front. They wanted to hurt their Moroccan rival. Libya under Gaddafi also armed the Polisario. Despite them being a left-wing nationalist movement, the USSR refused to support or arm the Polisario Front, probably because they relied on Moroccan phosphate imports. The UN said that they deplored Morocco's invasion and asked for them to withdraw their troops, but France and the United States, who sit on the UN Security Council, used their veto power to stop all efforts in the UN to order Morocco to stop. A 1978 US government report acknowledged that US military interest in Morocco is to maintain a friendly government's control of the southern shore of the Strait of Gibraltar. Morocco has the world's largest phosphate reserves. Morocco's phosphate could be vital at the end of the century when most known US reserves may be depleted. The American Secretary of State Henry Kissinger knew of Hassan's plans to invade because the CIA had told him on the 3rd of October 1975, and he supposedly provided Hassan with a green light to attack. On November 10th, as Hassan was invading, Kissinger told President Ford, "If he doesn't get it, he is finished. We should now work to ensure he gets it. The hope is for a rigged UN vote." As the 1975 crisis was happening, the United States essentially told Spain they had to cut a deal with Morocco, and Kissinger told them that if they did, there would be a $1.5 billion arms package in it for them. You see, France and the United States were worried that without the monarchy, Morocco could become a popular republic. And they had a fear that a successful Swahili revolution might be contagious and may prove dangerous to US economic interests in the Middle East. Morocco's monarchy was already on shaky grounds. Hassan had massacred over 300 protesters during strikes in 1965, and there were 2 coup attempts against him in the 1970s to form a democratic republic. Poverty was widespread, and just 4 families controlled over a third of Morocco's economy. By liberating Spanish Sahara, Hassan was giving his people a nationalist cause, a distraction from poverty and corruption. He gave his restless and coup-prone army a war to fight far away from Rabat. Following the US and apartheid South Africa's failed invasion of Angola in 1975, French intelligence, with Henry Kissinger's blessing, built a secret network called the Safari Club, whose main task was to protect Western interests in Africa and supply weapons to rebel groups and dictators. It was made up of the US, Morocco, France, Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Iran, with some help from apartheid South Africa, Rhodesia and Israel. This group helped arm Islamist Mujahideen in Afghanistan and airlifted Moroccan troops on US planes to crush revolts against the US-backed dictator of Zaire in the late 1970s to protect European mining interests. Hassan had managed to make his rule vital to Western interests in the region and made the occupation of Western Sahara the pillar that propped up his monarchy. If Paris and Washington wanted Hassan secure, then Western Sahara had to be conquered. By the late 1970s, the Polisario Front was rapidly securing recognition from African states, and they had Mauritania on the back front. Even direct French napalm strikes on Swahilis couldn't save Mauritania. By 1979, it surrendered, pulled out its troops, and recognized Western Sahara. Like in most guerrilla wars, the Polisario Front didn't actually have to win a decisive military victory. They just had to exhaust Morocco. To keep Hassan from losing, the United States and France poured billions worth of weapons into Morocco, mostly financed by the Saudis. The Saudi king also did not want to see a monarchy lose to a popular revolution. Second only to Egypt, Morocco received more US aid during the Cold War than any other African country. Morocco was handed advanced weapons like Cobra gunships, F-5 jets, Mirage fighter aircraft, artillery, tanks, and a $200 million surveillance system. Between 1975 and 1988, Morocco indiscriminately bombed Swahili civilians with US-made cluster munitions. Bombs filled with tiny steel bomblets that scatter on impact, shredding everything in range, which is why they are illegal under international law. The American militarization of the Moroccan regime bound its army to American weapon systems, which guaranteed their dependence on the United States, and ensured that the monarchy would be too heavily armed for the civilian population to ever overthrow. Even with Saudi money, by 1977, Morocco was spending nearly a quarter of its income on the army. With the economy collapsing, the International Monetary Fund provided loans to rescue Morocco's highly authoritarian regime, which was actively engaged in state terror. In exchange for the loans, Morocco had to enact austerity and increase taxes that gutted average Moroccan living standards. The Swahili people were outnumbered. They were less than 500,000 against Morocco's 30 million people. The Polisario Front could field a few thousand fighters. King Hassan had over 100,000 US and French trained soldiers on the bottomless purses of Washington, Paris, Riyadh, and the IMF. But the Swahilis knew the desert. They had lived there for generations. They were able to attack anywhere and then disappear back into the sand dunes. Their mobility was their greatest weapon, and so Morocco had to destroy it.
Guerrillas have regained control of 9/10 of the Western Sahara, even though they are outnumbered 10-1 by the Moroccan armed forces. Today, Morocco occupies only this small portion of the contested territory. To keep from losing it, the Moroccan army built a fortified defense wall around the entire area.
In the 1980s, with American, French, and Israeli expertise, Morocco began to build something unprecedented, a giant wall of sand, connecting it to military outposts, stretching 2,700 kilometers across the desert, guarded by over 100,000 soldiers, backed by radar, trenches, barbed wire, and 9 million landmines. They called it the Berm. It cost millions of dollars a day to maintain, but it strangled the Polisario. The Berm split Western Sahara into 3 worlds: the Moroccan-occupied zone, the thin strip of desert held by the Polisario called the Free Zone, and the refugee camps in Tindouf, Algeria. In the Free Zone, around 40,000 people live traditional nomadic lives. Nearly 200,000 people live in the refugee camps, and the remaining 250,000 Swahili live under Moroccan occupation. The Berm isolates Swahilis. Those living in the camps in Algeria can't see their families on the other side of the wall. Nomads and their herds have to dodge mines, and it isn't uncommon to see Swahili missing limbs, as the landmines have claimed thousands of victims. With the wall complete, Morocco conquered most of Western Sahara, but they could never defeat the Polisario without directly invading Algeria, so the war settled into a stalemate. In September of 1991, the UN and the African Union brokered a ceasefire and a simple deal. The 16-year-long war would end, and within a year, the UN would organise a referendum to let the Sahrawi people choose independence, integration into Morocco, or something else. To make it happen, the UN created a special mission, MINURSO, to organise a referendum. 30 years later, the referendum still hasn't been held. As the voter registry was being made, Morocco flooded the territory with settlers and demanded that they be allowed to vote. This was in direct violation of the Geneva Conventions, which bans an occupying power from transferring its own population into occupied territory. Settlers soon outnumbered the native population 3-1. By the early 2000s, the peace process had gone nowhere. In 2003, former US Secretary of State James Baker proposed a compromise. Western Sahara would enjoy 4 years of autonomy under Moroccan sovereignty, after which a referendum would be held. Even Moroccan settlers could vote. Polisario accepted, Morocco refused. You see, when King Hassan died in 1999, his son Mohammed VI inherited his throne, a $30 billion fortune, and a poor, corrupt and authoritarian state. Morocco ranked near the bottom of the UN Development Index. Illiteracy stood at 50%. And even today, 70% of Moroccans under 30 want to leave the country, which leaves an obvious question. Why would people in Western Sahara, sitting on some of the richest resources in North Africa, want to join a state that even Moroccans were trying to flee? After several protests where settlers joined in with the native Sahrawi people against the Moroccan monarchy, Morocco began to worry that they couldn't trust their own settlers to vote against independence. In 2007, Morocco announced that they would never accept any referendum that included an option for independence. Instead, they proposed an autonomy plan that kept Western Sahara under permanent Moroccan sovereignty. And so, the ceasefire allowed Morocco to entrench its occupation while the US and France protected it from any international pressure. The Sahrawi people never accepted the occupation of their homeland. Resistance towards Spain and then towards Morocco was constant. In 2010, a small group of Sahrawi families, angry at discrimination in jobs and housing, pitched their tents outside the city of El Ayoun. Those tents were a symbol of Sahrawi nomadic identity. Dozens soon turned into thousands. Within weeks, the camp swelled to 20,000 people. It became known as the Gadim Isaac Dignity Camp. The encampment demanded a fair share of Western Sahara's resources. Moroccan forces encircled the camp. They cut off food and water. They expelled foreign journalists. And then on the 27th of October, they murdered a 14-year-old boy. And then on the 8th of November 2010, they stormed the encampment. Firing live ammunition, torching tents and killing protesters. Sahrawi journalists who covered the event were arrested, tried in military courts, tortured into confessions and then sentenced to life in prison. Today in the occupied zone, supporting independence is a crime. Surveillance is constant. Forced disappearances are routine, and mass graves of Sahrawis have been discovered near military bases and phosphate mines. Reporters Without Borders calls Western Sahara a desert for journalists. Stephen Zunes, who writes consistently about Western Sahara, calls it the worst police state I've ever seen.
What you saw today is nothing compared to what we've witnessed over and over since 1975. But the news never gets out.
Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have documented Moroccan security forces using torture, beatings, detention without trial and murder against the Sahrawi people. MINURSO, the UN peacekeeping mission in the region, is the only UN mission in the world without a mandate to monitor human rights. This is a situation maintained by France, who uses their veto power on the UN Security Council to block any changes to MINURSO's mandate. So torture, detention and disappearances go unrecorded. In Western Sahara, Morocco has enforced a policy of Moroccanization. Settlement programs have brought hundreds of thousands of Moroccan settlers south with the promise of higher salaries, subsidized food, housing, energy, guaranteed jobs, and tax breaks. Sahrawis are now a minority in their own homeland. Moroccan Arabic and French are the official languages in Western Sahara, rather than Hassaniya, which is the dialect of Arabic spoken by the Sahrawi. And a lack of education choices forces Sahrawi to go north to get a decent education. One Sahrawi noted that every day we become similar to Palestinians. Another said, "I don't have a future. As long as there is occupation, my fate will be the same as that of my grandfather and my uncle, to disappear." Settlers receive secure jobs, while the Sahrawi face systemic poverty and police repression.
سحبني أفراد آخرين من الشرطة أرضا إلى أسفل الشارع حيث ثمة إطار مشتعل. دفعوني إلى داخله. لم يكن الأمر حدثا، لكنهم كانوا يسعون لإظهار قوتهم.
over 260,000 Swaharis have been displaced in the last 3 decades, with more than 20,000 arbitrary detentions, over 1,000 disappearances and hundreds of deaths in custody, and over 120 documented murders. As one young Swahari put it, all my dreams have been destroyed. Morocco killed them. I can only think of my friends who are imprisoned or killed. After university, I have 2 choices: to migrate abroad or to flee to the camps. They will never give me a job here. At first glance, this all looks like empty desert, but if you look at satellite images, you can see greenhouses rising out of the desert, ports packed with fishing ships, massive solar and wind farms, and the world's largest conveyor belt stretching for kilometers across the desert to connect this massive phosphate mine to ports to export. This land is rich. Morocco extracts phosphates, fish, tomato, solar and wind energy. Even Western Sahara's sand is sold off to replenish tourist beaches in the Canary Islands. All of it is taken without the consent of the Swahari people and with little benefit to them. Let's start with the phosphates. Western Sahara sits on some of the richest deposits of phosphates in the world, a massive treasure for the tiny Swahari population, a treasure that's only set to increase as growing populations in Asia and Africa will demand more and more fertilizer. The Bokram mine alone holds an estimated 500 million tons of phosphate, which today is mined and shipped off to buyers from India to New Zealand. In 2002, Morocco exported 1.23 million tons of Swahari phosphates, valued at $655 million. The profits don't stay here. They flow towards the king, Moroccan elites, and French companies in the north. Morocco now controls 72% of global phosphate reserves. China in second place controls just 6%. International law is fairly clear on this. In 2002, the UN ruled that exploiting resources here without the consent of the local population was illegal. Courts in Europe and Africa have said the same thing, but Morocco and its partners ignore these rulings, and the European Union is perhaps the worst offender. The waters off Western Sahara are some of the richest fishing grounds in the world. The European Union has consistently signed deals with Morocco that treat those waters as Moroccan, and so Swahari fish is sold on the cheap to the EU market, even when the EU's own courts say that these deals are illegal. In 2022, nearly 3/4 of Morocco's coastal catch came from Swahari waters. In 2024, 129,000 tons of fish products from Western Sahara entered the European Union, valued at $504 million. The European Union continues to fund settler housing, ports, and fish freezing halls in occupied territory. Rows of Moroccan-owned greenhouses filled with tomatoes, melons, blueberries, all grown with water pumped from scarce underground aquifers, taking desperately needed water from Swahari herders. The profits are extracted by Moroccan elites and French companies. Workers are imported from Morocco, and supermarkets like Carrefour lie to their customers as they falsely label these goods as Moroccan. Because of their trade deals, Morocco can sell these goods with lower tariffs in the European Union, which undercut European farmers. Because the greenhouses here grow crops with less worker regulations, less chemical regulations, and less environmental regulations. And of course, without the consent of the local population. In 2024, Morocco overtook Spain as the EU's second largest tomato supplier. Morocco has no oil. It has always been dependent on Algeria and Spain for energy imports. It dreams of energy independence through renewables. By 2030, half of Morocco's wind and 30% of its solar power will come from occupied Western Sahara. These projects, built by foreign giants like Siemens and Engie, are advertised as green development, but remove all mention of Western Sahara from their marketing. If you look closer, these projects rarely help the local Swahari population. Instead, they power the phosphate mines and they send electricity north to Morocco and Europe. These energy exports make Morocco, Europe, and West Africa dependent on energy generated in occupied Western Sahara. A leaked document showed that Morocco thought implicating Russia in the Sahara could guarantee a freeze on the Sahara file within the UN. So far, no oil or gas have been discovered in Western Sahara, although 2 illegal oil exploration licenses have been sold to foreign companies, both Israeli. Meanwhile, majority Swahari areas remain in darkness, plagued by blackouts and dry taps, but as one Swahari noted, you can guarantee settlers still have their showers. The monarchy hands out contracts to exploit Western Sahara to generals and security forces. Top generals earn millions per year from fishing contracts that employ mostly settlers. This ensures their loyalty to the king and makes it so they will do anything in their power to maintain the occupation. The Sahrawi living in the camps are entirely cut off from those in the occupied territories. Many refugees have been stranded there for over 40 years.
In the camps, 50% of the population is under 15.
The camps sit on Sahara Desert, where temperatures can reach 50 degrees Celsius in the summer and drop below freezing during the night.
En este medio ambiente, en esta vida que es difícil, problemas de agua, problemas de alimentación, hay un problema de alimentación, hay anemia, hay desnutrición.
According to UNICEF, 55% of children under the age of 5 suffer from anemia.
لكن المؤسف عنه يخلق هون ويموت هون. كيف ما خلق جيلنا احنا يخلق هون ويموت هون. في انتظار شيء المجتمع الدولي ما هو متعاون عليه ولا هو حقيقة مشكلة.
Children in the camps in Algeria dream of canned sardines, while Morocco sells millions of tons of fish caught in Sahrawi waters to Europeans. For decades, the Sahrawi were left to rot as the UN, US and France maintained a ceasefire that benefited Morocco. In November of 2020, Sahrawi protesters blocked a road here. This was a road Morocco had built illegally in a buffer zone. This road allowed Morocco to export to West Africa. Military presence here was banned under the ceasefire. Despite that, Moroccan troops entered the buffer zone and opened fire on the protesters. After 29 years, the Polisario Front declared the truce over. Guerrilla attacks resumed along the Berm, and Morocco answered with air and drone strikes, resulting in scores of Sahrawi civilian deaths. To this day, no new ceasefire has been implemented. A month after these clashes broke out, in December of 2020, under Donald Trump, the United States became the first country in the world to recognize Morocco's annexation of Western Sahara, in return for Morocco's normalization of relations with Israel under the Abraham Accords. Morocco now pays Israel tens of millions of dollars for attack and surveillance drones tested on Palestinians. Israeli Pegasus spyware turned Sahrawi and even Moroccan phones into surveillance tools. Israeli drones now patrol the Berm, killing not just Sahrawis but Mauritanians who wander too close. In 2023, Israel became the second country to recognize Morocco's annexation of Western Sahara. One by one, European states fell in line. In March of 2020, Spain openly sided with Morocco and endorsed its 2007 autonomy plan. The Netherlands followed, then Britain, and in 2024, Emmanuel Macron declared that Western Sahara's present and future lie within Moroccan sovereignty. For half a century, the United Nations has managed a stalemate that only benefits Morocco. The solution on paper is fairly simple: a free and open referendum supervised by the UN where the Sahrawi people can choose independence, integration with Morocco, or something else. International law on this is extremely clear. Western Sahara remains a non-self-governing territory, Africa's last colony. Until a referendum is held, Morocco's attempts to conquer and settle Western Sahara violate the Geneva Conventions. But Western Sahara stands out as an example of what happens when international law is on your side, but you don't choose the path of total war. The world just ignores you. The real lesson of the Berm is that might makes right, especially when the global superpowers are on your side. No people should be stripped of their land, their resources, and their right to decide their future. The Sahrawis built a government, they cooperated with the UN, they waited peacefully for decades. That makes Western Sahara more than just a question of one people's fate. It is a test of the international order that claims to rest on law, equal rights, and self-determination. The United States and the United Nations essentially wrote the rules. The Sahrawi followed them, and they were betrayed. So what is left of the international order if those the law is meant to protect are abandoned? If Africa's last colony cannot be freed, then the Berm is more than just a barrier. It is a tombstone for international law. When law becomes mere suggestion, what's left is raw power, the kind that answers to no one. If you want to see where that leads, just look at Uday Hussein, eldest son of Saddam Hussein. He began his public career when Saddam appointed him as head of Iraq's Olympic Committee and Football Association. Under his rule, Iraqi athletes that lost were tortured. Uday spent decades living a life of luxury with pet lions and gold-plated assault rifles, while committing torture and murder with a smile. I can't even mention most of what he did on YouTube. but you can go learn the entire insane story in Mad Kings, a gripping true crime meets geopolitics series from real life lore about the most unhinged rulers of the modern era. Episode 1 is the horrifying story of Uday Hussein. The editing is top notch, the stories are fascinating, and it's the perfect lens for understanding how, when institutions are weak, one man's whim can become law, and sometimes that man is absolutely demented. My analytics tell me that my viewers also love Modern Conflicts, a series that investigates serious subjects that will be censored anywhere else. Pair that with War Room and you've got a crash course in how power actually behaves. All of this lives on Nebula, the largest creator-owned streaming platform. No mid-rolls, no algorithmic nonsense, just a viewer-funded space where ambitious, high-quality projects get made because you actually want to watch them. Ad-driven sites could never financially support something like Mad Kings, or Modern Conflicts, or even my own demonetized videos. But Nebula makes that work possible. My videos are there ad-free, early, and alongside over 100 of your favorite creators, as well as exclusive originals and feature-length films. With my link, you can get 40% off Nebula. That's just $36 a year or $3 a month at go.nebula.tv/cogito. Or you can scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description. I've already put a direct link there to Mad Kings, so you can jump straight in. And if you're already on Nebula and you love it, you can grab a guest pass for a friend or send a gift card so they can watch for even longer. If you want to invest in the long-term future of independent content, you can pay once and have Nebula forever with a lifetime subscription. If you use my link, you'll get $200 off. By signing up to Nebula at go.nebula.tv/cogito, you support independent creators, and it genuinely makes videos like this possible. So thank you.